questions that every human being asks about what's true, or about what's important, or about what's meaningful, there is no more significant question to answer than this one. Does God exist? You know,
Right from the start, this is nonsense. No, that isn't an essential question because whether God exists or not doesn't matter. You people want God to exist. More importantly, Christianity to be the truth. In addition to this, a lot of atheists keep asking the Christians for both evidence of God's existence and for their reasons for believing. And I've been saying for years now that asking the Christians instead why they want X or Y to be true is the actual essence of the matter. Everybody in this world would reject any inhumane scripture upon reading it if they didn't want it to be true. If it turned out to be true, they would either rebel against the Creator or just accept the consequence out of refusal to enable that Creator who imposed that consequence to begin with. In addition to that, this is why atheism is such a fucking thorn in the Christian side. We're the antithesis to their fascist and bigoted mentality, whether mentally ill or brainwashed.
Existence is the most decisive issue of life because the answer you give to that one question sets an irrevocable course for everything that follows. Now, in this course, you will learn that we don't have to guess when it comes to answering the question about God's existence. Instead, God's fingerprints, so to speak, are all around us. In other words, the world around us, the real world, is thick with evidence for God.
Suppose it is. Does that, quote, evidence indicate goodness? Because I can point out many negatives about both life and this world, because of both reality and caused by religious people and corrupt politicians. This is a completely one-sided assertion, evidence alone, and not quality. I usually ask why you Christians approve of God, but you are asserting evidence here, Greg, so why do you approve of this evidence? Do you like being mortal and vulnerable to reality? Of course, let's hear what you say next.
In fact, we bump into it all the time. In our sessions together, I'll walk you through a thoughtful analysis of 3 of the key bumps that evidence God's existence. Details of reality that Christianity can make sense out of, but atheism cannot. I'm Greg Koukl.
You've gone from evidence of God's existence to Christianity making sense of reality. Isn't Christianity supposed to be the sense, the reality, and not the mechanism that makes the sense? Of course, the idea isn't to make sense, but to have faith in this religion. Why do you want Christianity to be the methodology to decipher reality? You are right though, atheism doesn't. That's because atheism is simply non-belief, non-religion. Again though, the whole point of this, quote, course is to trample on atheism, right? The problem is that you've already changed the goalpost about God and contradicted what Christianity is.
For Stand to Reason University, let's get started with atheism bumping into reality. Someone once said that reality is what you bump into and sometimes injures you when you don't take it seriously. Now, I'm here in my shop, and I got lots of tools here, and some of them are really dangerous, but the most dangerous tool in my shop is my table saw. It's driven by a 3-horsepower motor. I got a 10-inch blade.
And the fact that you admit that reality can be dangerous, even deadly or fatal, says it all. So, shifting my psychological question from Christianity to reality, why do you approve of reality, as you admit that reality is dangerous? The problem is that you are claiming Christianity to be the method, not the reality itself, which means it can't be the truth. Which means, actually, I don't even know what that means. This conceptual take on Christianity is new to me. The Bible isn't God's word or will, not even instructions for life or an explanation of God, just a book that makes sense of reality, as you claim?
Man, that'll take your fingers off just like that if you're not careful. So how do I stay safe in my shop? I'm careful. I look closely. I pay attention. I think things through. And that's exactly how we're going to approach the question of God's existence.
But God isn't here. while our existential experience is only this planet and each other.
First, we need to define our terms here. Now, we know what theism is. It's a belief that there is a personal God, a conviction that God exists. So what's atheism? It's just the opposite. Atheism, now watch this, is the belief that there is no God. A king.
Those who claim there is no God are not atheists, as the term is the opposite of belief, making it a disbelief. This is incorrect.
David wrote, "The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands." All right? The atheist, by contrast, says the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. Now, before we go any further,
why do you want heaven to exist and God to have glory? And how can heaven be so if sin has only been forgiven? Won't that simply mean heaven will be doomed to also become fallen? If sin is bad here, how is it accepted in heaven, and why would it be? Again, how can heaven be so, as the forgiven saved ones are so angry about everything we, quote, sinners do here on earth? Define glory. As an atheist, and I'm sure I speak for many other atheists, I don't know what's out there. I'm also not concerned because my life is not affected by anything outside this planet or world. I certainly didn't ask for this shit existence, did you, Greg?
I want you to notice something else about atheism. It is a standard move by atheists nowadays to simply say they are not asserting that God doesn't exist, but they simply have no belief in God. And since they lack a belief, they don't need to defend their lack of belief. All right? Now,
actually, we do, against you Christians. This video being both evidence and an example of why we do. You say all the glory goes to God, but you're also bothered by atheism. So, where's God's glory and how can atheism be such a burden to God, or you guys?
Now, I don't think that's exactly intellectually honest, because no one writes best-selling books about their lack of beliefs, all right? Atheists are making a case, and the case that they're trying to make is that there is no God.
Yes, some people are saying that, but that isn't atheism. Regardless, why does that bother you? We're all going to hell, right? The problem there is that you say Christianity only makes sense of reality, while heaven and hell are both biblical concepts. Do you see the problem there?
That's their belief. Certainly they have no belief in God, agreed, but they do have a belief about God. And their belief about God is that God doesn't exist. So it's not like they don't have to make a defense for their view, since they're not really asserting anything. They are. They're asserting that God does not exist. And that is their belief about God.
There are some atheists who have misconceptions about atheism, but you Christians are the ones who fabricate the misconceptions about atheism and use them to argue against atheists, because you know that Christianity is bullshit. Atheism wouldn't even be on your faith radar otherwise.
They are holding and advancing, okay? Don't be caught by that trick, all right? So how do we make the case that there actually is a God? When my daughter, who's now 16,
Why do you want to?
about 8 years old, she asked me a question. She said, "Papa, how do we know that God is true?" is what she said. How do we know that the God we're talking about here is actually real, is her point. And I have to think about this now, and this is...
Wrong question. The proper question is, why do you want God to exist and want this God to be the authoritarian figure which the Bible depicts him?
What I do kind of with adults, but now I got my own daughter who is a youngster who I now need to explain this to. And as I'm pondering how to answer it, all of a sudden something came into my mind.
Would anybody ever need to explain God or religion to anybody if neither of them were ever conceptualized? You obviously see the God concept as a burden.
That, as I look back on it now, I think captures my whole approach to this enterprise. And here's what I said to her. I said, "Honey, the reason that we believe that God is true
Enterprise?
is because
What?
he's the best explanation for the way things are. Let me just say that again, because it's so.
Why do you want an explanation for reality or existence? And why do you want God to be that explanation? What makes you think your belief in God is a valid explanation?
The reason that we believe in God is because He's the best explanation for the way things are. And what I was doing with her, even though I didn't explain it at the time, is I was introducing the notion of explanatory power. What I mean by that is, you see things in the world and you're simply asking the question, what best explains these significant features of the real world? And if you have an idea that explains them well and a contrary idea that doesn't, then the first idea has better explanatory power and therefore is more likely to be true.
How do you figure that idea is the actual explanation? Because you believe it's the best? Maybe your sense of logic is flawed. Maybe you were mentally ill.
Now, just a little hint here. I want to let you in on a strategic insight. For us as Christian theists, we have a powerful ally. And what is that? We have reality on our side.
How is reality on anybody's side, let alone yours? Why do you want reality to be on anybody's side? You've just explained that saw blade. Why would it cut you at all if reality was on your side? And how would that affect Christianity as you claim that religion makes sense of reality?
And I want to explain what I mean by that. I got this insight from Francis Schaeffer. And first he noted
Nice
that if
insight.
Christianity is true, then it is an accurate view of reality. And that would mean that all...
How can Christianity be true if it's a methodology of making sense of reality, as you say, which is the premise of this course? That would make Christianity simply an observer, which would also mean it can't have any opposition, only different observations.
all human beings are really made in the image of God, and all human beings must live in the world that God made, even if they don't believe it. All right.
So, God can also be cut by a saw blade? How can Christianity make sense of a being that the world today has never seen?
Right? Therefore, if Christianity is true and it's the better explanation of reality, atheists who deny God must be living in denial of reality at some point. Therefore,
Why do you accept God? Why do you accept this dangerous reality that you baselessly believe God created? How does Christianity know of God if we haven't met God? As you claim, it's just a methodology to make sense of reality.
for sooner or later, atheists who deny God's world, reality, are going to bump into the world as it really is. And what I mean here is they're going to affirm some feature of reality, sometimes without even realizing it, that makes no sense given their worldview, but makes perfect sense given our worldview. Take
The secular world makes no sense, or you just don't want it to.
Richard Dawkins, for example. He's probably the world's most famous atheist right now. Dawkins says that, on the one hand, if you look at nature, according to him, there is no design, and no purpose, and no evil, and no good. Nothing, he says, but blind, pitiless
How does
indifference.
design indicate a God,
Now-
even if so?
That totally consistent with his atheistic worldview. No evil, no good. Belief in morality, on his view, is just a trick evolution plays on us to get our selfish genes into the next generation. So at that point when he says that, he is making statements that are completely consistent with his worldview of atheism. However, on the other hand,
So, why do you have a problem with that? How is Christianity good?
and in his book, The God Delusion, he attacks the God of the Bible. And here's what he says. He says, the God of the Old Testament is a vindictive, bloodthirsty, homophobic, racist, genocidal, sadomasochistic, malevolent bully. Now, do you see the problem there? Clearly, Dawkins is not coming to that conclusion based on his atheism, which he says dictates no evil, no good. Notice all of those challenges to God of the Old Testament are that he's evil.
I've never read any of Dawkins' books, so I don't know what he said. But this is a straw man, because atheism is the opposite of theism. This means that any secular worldview is simply without God, not without good or bad. Therefore, yes, Richard's assessment does make sense. I don't believe in the concept of, quote, evil, because it's a supernatural concept, although no Christian has ever actually provided a definition for evil. I guess the idea is that people either do evil things or they are evil. I say such people are mentally ill, not evil. As for these characteristics laid out by Richard about God, is he wrong?
That complaint against God makes no sense in his worldview. But I'll tell you something, moral assessments like that, I don't think they're accurate in his case, but
how does Christianity make sense to you, and why do you want Christianity to make sense?
that kind of assessment make perfect sense in our worldview. So Dawkins, notice, is living in a...
Actually, no, it makes no sense in the Christian worldview because God should have created life incapable of evil, perfect. If God simply deliberately neglected to, for his own free will cause, to test us, or as a punishment for Adam and Eve's disobedience, then God is evil, or should I say, mentally ill. Many Christians would argue that Adam and Eve were perfect, but they wouldn't have disobeyed God if they were, unless God is the bad guy.
Contradiction on this issue, all right? He talks on the one hand kind of like an atheist, and then all of a sudden, when his guard is down, his natural understanding of morality that God built into him is coming out. But it's a contradiction with his atheism. And that is a point of tension. And Francis Schaeffer said, when we see that, when we see Dawkins, in this case, bumping into reality, when he raises those kinds of moral complaints against God, and he's trading on our worldview, not his, that's where we can draw attention to it and use that on our behalf.
Unfortunately for you, everything you've just said there for the past minute is from a straw man. Atheism is only the disbelief. The belief that there is no God. The worldview would be based on that, not the non-existence of good and, quote, evil. This doesn't matter if Richard intended what you are saying he did or not.
What I'm saying is this: Christianity has better explanatory power. In other words, it fits the world in a way that atheism does not on some very, very important issues.
No, because the concept of evil, along with us being mortal, is the common reason why people believe and want this religion to be true. Because the afterlife aspect of it relieves that reality. They won't blame God even though he's the creator, because he provides that afterlife, which is why Adam and Eve were written into the mythology. The Christians can blame them instead. All of you need to bump into that reality.
And these are issues that resonate with our deepest intuitions about reality, our deepest understandings about the way the world actually is. What are some of those bumps I was talking about? Those features of reality that the atheist bumps into that makes no sense at all in his worldview, but makes...
What do you mean, features of reality? You've just said reality is dangerous, using that saw blade as an example. How is that a feature?
Perfect sense in our worldview, okay? There are lots of different examples of that, but in this class, I want to talk to you about 3 bumps with reality that create serious worldview problems for the atheist, but turn out supporting our worldview perfectly, okay? I'm just going to call them...
The problem here, before you get into those examples, is that this whole thing was originally about Christianity making sense of reality. Now you're talking about Christianity being a worldview, and not just a philosophy. These examples supporting that Christian worldview, all the while attacking atheism, which I guess is the point of this whole thing.
Of stuff, the bump of bad, and the bump of me. So that's going to be my outline for the rest of our course. Let's take a moment and see what we've covered so far in this session. First, we defined our terms. We said that theism is a belief that there is a God, and atheism is the belief that there is no God. It's not simply a lack of belief about God. It's a lack of belief in God, but there certainly is a belief about God that they need to defend.
Okay, I don't believe a God exists. Therefore, I don't believe anything about God. The key word you're pointing out is in, while the context is existence. If atheism doesn't specify the existence part, that needs to change. That way, you Christians won't have that to screw with the word atheism about, as you claim Christianity is so realistic and so great. Who the fuck am I kidding? You still would.
The second thing we talked about, I said the Christian has a powerful ally that helps him answer that question, whether God exists, and that ally is reality.
Why does Christianity need an ally? Because of atheism? I thought Christianity was only something that makes sense of reality.
I also pointed out that even atheists have to live in God's world, which means that they must affirm certain things about the real world that are in conflict with an atheistic view.
Even if we do live in a divine world, you Christians are the ones preaching against everything, and chasing after atheists and atheism all the time, and trying to push your fascist Christian beliefs politically. God at least stays in hiding and shuts the fuck up.
I mentioned that theism is true. I said because it's the best explanation for the way things are.
So, reality isn't really on your side. Atheism is a big bug up Christianity's superstitious ass, and you are trying to take these passive-aggressive jabs at atheism because Christianity keeps clashing with reality.
And then the third thing I did here is I suggested a strategy for dealing with atheism. First, we take a look at reality. Two, we show that atheists can't explain important details of the real world, but we can as theists. These are the ways that atheists bump into reality. And next time,
Dealing with atheism. What's to deal with if reality is on your side and Christianity is the best explanation for how reality is? So, how is reality? And if it's dangerous, then why do you agree with Christianity as you insist that it's the best explanation for it? What would atheism's inability to explain anything matter? You Christians would never listen anyway. While you would diagnose us as devils or demons or whatever every time an atheist tries.